Good afternoon. My name is Mark Chupka. I'm the Vice President for Research and Programs here at the Energy Storage Association. Thank you for attending today's webinar on how to boost your StorageIQ, an introduction to the information service provided by Customized Energy Solutions at CES. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll send you a link to the recording and slides within the next couple of days. Questions can be submitted at any time throughout the webinar via the questions chat box in your browser, and we'll come to those after our speakers. All meetings and teleconferences of the Energy Storage Association are held in accordance with our antitrust guidelines. We ask that you abide by these guidelines during today's webinar. The full guidelines are available in the members-only area of the ESA website. If you are not yet an ESA member and would like more information, you can reach out to my colleague, Brenda Lovell. Membership includes a range of benefits, including free access to all of our webinars, including those exclusively for members. Perhaps more relevant for today, ESA members qualify for a significant discount on StorageIQ, which you'll hear about. Please reach out to Brenda for more information. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you that on August 26th through 28th, we'll hold the 2020 ESA Annual Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You'll find the registration, poster proposal submission guidelines and agenda, and more information on the ESA website. Last month, ESA and CES announced a new partnership designed to expand the availability of timely information on regulatory and market changes relevant to energy storage. We're excited about this partnership, which has three main components. The first component went live last week when ESA and CES jointly released the inaugural issue of the StorageIQ Quarterly Summary, which outlined regional regulatory developments during the first 3 months of 2020. This is available to the public for free. The second component starts today in a modified form. This component gives StorageIQ subscribers free and exclusive access to a series of quarterly webinars that ESA will host. Of course, today's webinar is free and open to all. The third component, as mentioned before, gives ESA members a substantial discount on the StorageIQ subscription. With that backdrop as introduction, I'll hand it over to Chad Dixon of CES. Chad?
Thanks so much, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope everyone is feeling well and healthy. My name is Chad Dixon, and I am the StorageIQ Product Manager here at Customized Energy Solutions. And I'd like to welcome you to our first quarterly StorageIQ webinar. We at CES are very excited to launch this new partnership with ESA, and briefly I'll talk about the presenters that will be giving you the regional updates today. So first I will be giving the PJM regional update. Mike Belinsky is going to actually lead us off with the FERC update and ISO New England update. Then we will talk to Tony Abate, who is our New York NYISO market expert. He will then pass it to me to do PJM. I will then pass it to John Fernandez, who is our senior consultant in charge of the central region. Specifically, he will be discussing ERCOT updates today. Joel Berger will then go into some SGP updates. And then we also have Paul Luukkonen and Patrick Shoup, who will round out the regional updates today. Before I get into the specifics of StorageIQ as a product, I'd like to introduce Customized Energy Solutions to those of you who may not know us. Customized Energy Solutions is an energy consulting and services company. We provide electricity market expertise and software platforms that allow our clients to capitalize on the evolving wholesale and retail electricity and natural gas markets. CES hosts a market operations center at our headquarters in Philadelphia. We bid and schedule over 9 gigawatts of energy assets, including over 270 megawatts of energy storage. CES has over 200 associates across 9 regional offices in the United States, Canada, India, Japan, and Mexico. We support clients in all 7 U.S. ISOs and RTOs. I'd now like to review the agenda for the webinar today. First, we will review StorageIQ as a service. Then we will provide updates on FERC activity as well as regional updates from the Northeast, Central, and West. followed by a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session to answer any questions about StorageIQ or the individual regional updates. So talking about StorageIQ as a service, as I mentioned in a previous slide, CES has been providing electricity market intelligence clients for over 20 years. Now, we are providing that service specifically for companies interested in energy storage. StorageIQ is a monthly reporting service that delivers the latest updates on ISO, RTO activities, rulemaking, key changes, as well as state and regulatory proceedings that impact energy storage. CS consultants help StorageIQ customers gain a competitive advantage by advising how these changes might impact their business. StorageIQ is offered for 3 different superregions, which are Northeast, Central, and West. CES offers StorageIQ under a tiered membership structure. The first tier, Basic, entitles customers to a comprehensive monthly report that details all relevant ISO and state activity, as well as updates on key upcoming meetings and deadlines. StorageIQ Basic customers will have access to the quarterly webinar, similar to that which you will see today, which details the most relevant activity for storage in the quarter. The second tier, StorageIQ Gold, entitles customers to all of the coverage of the basic subscription, as well as monthly pricing trends and one-on-one calls with CES market experts. Pricing for StorageIQ is listed here by region. ESA members will receive an instant 25% discount on basic or gold subscriptions. You can find out more information about StorageIQ or the other services that CES offers at ces-ltd.com/StorageIQ. Or you can reach out to StorageIQ info@ces-ltd.com. Putting it all together, CES has the market expertise coming from multiple different business lines to help clients understand what they need to know about storage markets. StorageIQ is a cost-effective way to stay ahead of the regulatory curve and capture new opportunities for storage in U.S. markets. Now, to kick off our FERC and regional updates, here is our ISO New England market expert, Mike Berlinski.
Thanks, Chad. Hi, Mike Berlinski. For our StorageIQ service, and that's provided as a bonus to the regional coverage that we offer. So first on FERC, the Commission, like the ISOs, has stopped in-person meetings due to the coronavirus crisis, but they have been working away, having virtual events and still issuing a lot of orders. First, on the commissioners, Commissioner McNamee has announced that he is not going to seek renewal of his term, which will expire at the end of June this year, but that is okay for quorum's sake, as nominee James Danley, FERC General Counsel and a Republican, was sworn in at the end of March for a term that will expire in June 2023. Of note here is the break from tradition, as his nomination was not accompanied by a Democratic one. Next, for Order 841, there was an appeal to the D.C. Circuit Court back in July 2019 by a number of associations, forgive the acronyms, but APPA, AMP, EEI, Enrica, NARUC, TAPS. So those are the petitioners. FERC is the respondent. And this really was a protest over federal authority over wholesale market access to distribution-connected storage resources, as per Orders 841 and 841A. Of note, ESA, state attorney generals, AEE, and other clean energy and environmental organizations have filed in support of FERC. So this proceeding is ongoing. Next, for transmission incentives, at the end of March, FERC issued a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or NOPR, on this, and comments are due at the beginning of July. So the NOPR proposes numerous revisions to incentives, including of note an incentive for transmission technologies that enhance reliability, efficiency, and capacity. And this is really about shifting from risks and challenges to focusing on project benefits. So while storage as a transmission asset is not explicitly mentioned in the NOPR, it is in the storage industry's interest to continue to comment on the applicability of and benefits of storage as transmission. Lastly, for hybrid resources, it's very exciting to see that on April 7th, FERC announced a technical conference that will be held on July 23rd. And again, it may be up in the air still whether that will be in person or virtual. But this is to discuss the technical and market issues for projects that have both a generation resource and an electric storage resource. ESA in the past has asked for a proceeding on hybrid resources, and now we have one. Panelist nominations are being accepted through May 15th. So this will be a very important proceeding for the industry. So now I'll move over to New England as part of our Northeast coverage. So first for ISO New England, and then we'll talk about the states in the region. So first for Order 841, as background, ISO New England did a lot of market enhancements for energy storage. Last year, it really dramatically improved the market design, and now it's pretty well regarded in many areas. So the enhanced storage participation improvements went into effect early in 2019, so that improved the market participation options greatly. Then they had to do a few more enhancements to fully comply with Order 841. Most of those went into place at the end of last year. FERC did require a few additional tweaks. So in February of this year, ISO New England filed a slightly revised tariff. There were no comments filed on that. ISO also requested a hearing on the requirement to have state of charge parameters in the day-ahead market, which the industry is split over whether it's really helpful or not. But anyway, FERC rejected that request in April, so ISO will have to figure something out. So we'll see what happens there. Next, for capacity market qualification, ISO New England has been well regarded in this area since it has a relatively short duration requirement for storage to get full capacity credit, and a few batteries have even received capacity awards, which is significant in the Northeast markets. But anyway, at the end of last year, storage developers and others filed complaints about mistreatment of their storage resources in ISO New England's recent capacity market auction. While FERC rejected those complaints, it did direct the Internal Market Monitor to work to improve its practices. And the IMM recently promised the stakeholders to do so. Now, more importantly, later this year, ISO is set to start to work on offer costs for storage. And this will be critical for the industry to participate to ensure that there are appropriate values on the cost and net revenue side to enable capacity market participation. Next, for a future grid study, just important to know that ISO has kicked off this study to look at a future with a lot of renewables and other clean energy resources to evaluate the impact of state policy on the markets. And this comes after states and generators have complained about either too little or too much state policy influence on wholesale markets, and stakeholder meetings have just gotten underway for this study. Now, although storage has not been the focus of this discussion, it'll definitely be impacted by and can help shape this effort. So I encourage folks to monitor this. And lastly, for co-located resources, after a long wait, ISO recently released some more detailed training on these resources and their interconnection, market qualification, and market participation options. So that's a good resource. Now, metering is currently being discussed at stakeholder committees, and we're hoping for broader discussion, which has been on the horizon for a while now. But I do expect that to come to the stakeholder process this year. And then also ISO has said that they will release some FAQs on the topic of co-located resources. So that's good. So moving ahead to the states in New England, first, certainly Massachusetts continues to lead on storage. There's been constant activity with the Department of Public Utilities and the Department of Energy Resources, lots of current and emerging incentives. Now, aside from Massachusetts, Maine recently produced a report noting the benefits of storage. Connecticut has now a storage subdocket in its distribution system planning proceeding. And then both Vermont and Rhode Island have open proceedings on the regulation of storage resources. So that's it for New England. I'll now turn it over to Tony, our New York expert.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tony Abate. I'm here from New York, and first I'll just say thank you to folks that have been offering their well wishes to New York State as we go through the coronavirus crisis. It has clearly been a very impactful here in New York State, and I think it's starting to get to the point where many of us know folks that are impacted very personally, especially in our downstate region. So thank you for keeping us in your thoughts. Just by way of background, trying to make the most of our short time here, I want you to appreciate that New York is a single state, single ISO, so we're a little bit unique. NYISO has had storage in the market since even before 2011 with pumped hydro, but 2011 was when advanced storage started to be in the market. In 2018, the state had an energy storage roadmap, and NYSERDA, the state's arm, was awarded, granted roughly $400 million to incentivize energy storage participation. Currently, the state goal is for 3,000 megawatts by 2025. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act was new last summer, and that puts into statute, into law, that New York State will have 70% renewable or clean energy by 2030 and 100% by 2040. So in that context, thinking about energy storage, highlight a few things that are most germane from the past quarter. In December, FERC ruled on a number of states' compliance filings with regard to integrating energy storage for full market participation. So in December, FERC did accept, call it 90% of everything that NYISO had proposed for that compliance filing. So energy, capacity, and ancillary services will all be available. What is really novel about what NYISO has proposed and what FERC has approved as an option is a NYISO-managed state of charge. So that's an interesting mechanism to consider for storage in the state. The go live is really important here. That FERC had asked the go live would be in May of 2020. NYISO had just changed over their energy management system, business management system, so they requested a delay until September. So now the go live date is kind of an absolute maximum of September 30th. So looking forward to that being a go live later on in this year. Now, the one issue that NYISO is seeking review with FERC is FERC's order to apply transmission charges to energy that is used to store, to charge the bulk energy storage. FERC had requested that NYISO change what they had proposed, which was to not incur those charges. So we'll be watching how that develops in coming quarters. Another very key thing for considering energy storage in New York State is how the capacity rules have shaken out. This was very closely paralleling a track over the past year with a distributed energy resources filing that NYISO made to FERC. So even though these capacity valuation issues were not addressed in their 841 compliance, they were addressed in the NYISO's DER, distributed energy resource filing. So the way it is shaken out is that stakeholders and the NYISO have agreed to provide 2 hours duration, a 45% valuation for capacity purposes. 4 hours would get 90% and 6 hours would get 100%. Now, what you need to take into account as well is that NYISO had said that when we get to 1,000 megawatts of capacity suppliers coming from energy storage, they see all of those valuations being stepped down slightly. So once 1,000 megawatts are in the market, you would need to have an 8-hour duration resource in order to get that 100% payment. So everything is prorated downwards. So a 2-hour resource would get 37.5%, and a 6-hour would be necessary to get 90%. So those are now approved by FERC, and they will be going into effect, unfortunately, a little bit after energy storage resource participation goes live in September. These rules take effect in middle of 2021. The final thing that happened in this quarter is some progress on buyer-side mitigation. Buyer-side mitigation is the NYISO's process to maintain the effectiveness of their capacity market pricing and to weed out kind of undue influence on those prices. This mitigation is only in effect in the southeast of New York State. Maybe I should advance the slide for you. In the southeast of the state, we call those zones G through J and zones J. They are two distinct zones, one being a combination, one being singular. So any new resources coming into the market that don't qualify for an exemption are tested for their economics in this buyer-side mitigation. Now, the New York State Department of Public Service and NYSERDA, the state entities, had asked FERC to order NYISO to exempt energy storage, and that decision came down in February, where FERC, again, that had previously ruled conservatively in PJM on a similar similar issue, did say that they would not provide or order NYISO to provide a blanket exemption to buyer-side mitigation. This may not be the last time that we hear of this issue. Those parties could still be, look for rehearing or taking the case to the next level. But what has happened is that NYISO and the stakeholders have worked together on a number of rule changes that will make it easier, presumably easier for what they're calling public policy resources to pass these mitigation tests. And those have been approved now by stakeholders, and the NYISO is hoping to have those in effect for resources that are being studied in the summer of 2020. Those late-breaking news, those will be persistent. Those changes will go on into following capability years and study years. With that summary of New York and NYISO, I'll turn it over to Chad Dixon to talk about PJM.
Sure, thanks, Tony. So for PJM, PJM is really the definition of an evolving market right now. First, I'd like to talk about PJM's effort to develop a new capacity evaluation methodology for storage and renewables. Late in Q1, very early Q2, actually PJM did gain approval to develop an effective load carrying capability methodology for storage. This methodology has been used by other ISOs similarly, and PJM is developing their own flavor of that currently. This new methodology will replace the 10-hour rule for capacity storage resources. The development will occur in PJM's new capacity capability senior task force over the next 8 months. So with this approval from FERC, FERC did request PJM to finish this up in a shorter timeline. The happenings of this meeting, they're going on right now, and they're very, very relevant. So I definitely encourage interested parties to get involved and learn more. Also in Q1, FERC ruled that PJM must implement a minimum offer price rule for all state-subsidized capacity resources, all new state-subsidized capacity resources. The minimum offer price for storage is based on the expected cost of new entry into the capacity market, netting out the expected energy and ancillary service revenues to get the net cone or cost of new entry value. This net cone value, the cost of new entry, is above the capacity market clearing price for the zone. The capacity storage resource may not clear in a given auction and thus will miss out on capacity market revenues. These first two items are definitely interlinked, as the cost of the new entry is somewhat based on the duration requirement for capacity storage resources. Switching gears a bit to talk about the regulation market. So back in 2017, PJM changed the regulation signal, making it more stringent and hard to follow. Battery storage resources that had been operating under the old signal and who had to reduce their capability based on the new signal will now receive out-of-market compensation based on their original capability. This was part of the now approved, long-awaited frequency regulation market settlement offer that was developed in a settlement conference between ESA, other storage parties, and PJM. This is a positive, especially for the affected parties that will receive this compensation. However, PJM mentioned in the settlement offer that they may look to condense the two regulation signals, Reg A and Reg D, into one non-energy neutral signal in the future. We'll obviously be following this very close and we'll report in StorageIQ on any updates on the regulation market. Lastly, as I mentioned, PJM created two senior task forces to define and develop market rules for solar plus storage and emerging technologies. Also, PJM began looking at storage as transmission. However, PJM will likely await the results of the upcoming FERC technical conference on storage as transmission before beginning development of any major changes. Moving to the states. In Q1, Virginia did pass the Clean Energy Economy Act, so VCEA. This requires state utilities, namely AEP and Dominion, to construct or acquire a minimum of 3,100 megawatts of energy storage by 2035. I did mention a link here to the policy brief that Energy Storage has put out, so definitely helpful there. Also in Q1, Maryland reauthorized the energy storage income tax credit. This improves on an existing energy storage tax credit program. This is a first-come, first-served program with a bucket of tax credits around $750,000 for the taxable year. $150,000 is the maximum tax credit that may be issued for installing an energy storage system at a certain property. Now I'll turn it over to John, our Central Region lead, to cover the updates for the ERCOT market. John?
Okay, thank you kindly, Chad. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be speaking with you today. I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it for Central, starting with Texas, with ERCOT. ERCOT became a very different place for energy storage in 2019, going from a market that really didn't do much to support the platform to doing everything it could to actively make changes in the market to support the platform. To keep up with all the stakeholder activity, ERCOT staff formed the Battery Energy Storage Task Force in October. Very quickly got some baseline definitions, rules, and parameters in place to support standalone storage. They took great feedback from the industry, recognizing that hybrid storage was really one of the priorities for the industry. And so right away in January of this year, they started releasing, proposing rules for hybrids, really bifurcating the conversation into AC versus DC coupled systems. The AC systems more following rules for standalone. With the DC coupled systems, there's still some questions to remain on how these projects will be metered, especially with revenue grade metering, so that it can be settled in the market. How very specific configurations and activities such as solar clipping will be treated, both in terms of offers to the market and again with settlement. But staff is really making great progress. It is worth noting the proposed rules from staff started out as KTCs, key topics. They have now moved on to NPRs, which are protocol changes, proposed effectively the tariffs in ERCOT. So things are moving quickly. We will look at formal tariff filings very soon. The Battery Energy Storage Task Force is also making progress on self-limiting resources. These are really hybrid systems where the asset owner may have, let's say, 150 megawatts of resources, I'm just going to say wind and storage, behind a point of interconnection, but the interconnection agreement or what is actually going to participate in the market may be limited per the business plan, per the inverter, may be limited to, say, 100 megawatts. And so ERCOT is trying to put rules in place to reflect the actual capabilities or the planned activities of those projects, which CES thinks is great for the market. Reflecting business realities at the end of the day should be a good thing. Also worth noting, technical requirements for storage. So these are things like the capability to respond to frequency, ride through, voltage, reactive power. Some very technical requirements, minimum performance requirements are being put into place. We have been speaking about these with our clients along the way. Clients have been providing us feedback. It seems like there may be some lingering questions. Any challenges that may arise, are they actually due to the deadbands that ERCOT might be putting in place, or is it more about controls, integration, lag in software capabilities? So we've been helping our clients work through that with ERCOT along the way. At the end of the day, storage being able to show and prove performance while participating in markets, we think is a good thing for the industry. So this gives some credibility, just additional credibility to storage in Texas. Less focus on the storage task force itself and more on the market side. So ERCOT is talking about how storage will contribute to reliability. It's important to note there is no kind of capacity or resource adequacy structure in Texas. But again, good to see storage being recognized as an asset that is useful to the grid and helps reliability. Energy storage can now update energy offer curves in real time right against the SCED dispatch. This is really just a way for storage to manage state of charge and perhaps even economically optimize itself across an operating day. These are one of the rules that started to go in place last year that began to drive a lot of the new policy behind storage. So it's great to see. And finally, some changes to ancillary services in ERCOT. A completely new ancillary service structure went into place at the beginning of last month. More opportunities for revenues, for example, primary frequency response in ERCOT, really good for all market participants. And some of you may be familiar with the capped FRRS product that's been in place in ERCOT for a number of years. That product is finally going away. It will probably remain in place until real-time co-optimization effectively goes live in around the 2024 timeframe. With CES for our clients, historically we have modeled FRRS service for project optimizations that we provide to our clients, but it's just not something we've been able to give much credence to because it is capped and has been oversubscribed for some time. So broadly speaking, this should create some more opportunity for regulation revenues in ERCOT, especially revenues based on performance. So those are the keys in Texas. I will now turn it over to Paul Luukkonen, who covers MISO and is also our Canadian market expert. So Paul, it is all yours.
Great. Thanks very much, John. And thanks, everyone, for joining today. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to jump right in. There's a broad range of activities going on in MISO for storage. First off is the fast AGC signal, so the regulation automatic generation control that provides the second-to-second balancing of the grid. MISO has implemented, effective January 26, a fast signal, a fast AGC. A couple of key parameters there are the ramp rate has to be equal to 80 megawatt per minute, and the minimum duration is 20 minutes or more. This is a very good thing for storage. We anticipate, roughly speaking, a 30 to 50% uptick on current regulation pricing for resources that are able to provide this. And good to note as well, CES has integrated this signal, the fast fast AG signal in our modeling and our revenue forecast. The next up is storage as transmission-only asset. Federally, this is very significant and potentially precedent-setting. A lot of people will be paying attention to this. MISO's filing was made late last year in December, and FERC's decision came out early in March, essentially suspending the effectiveness of these tariff revisions until August, until so far as FERC staff can put together a technical conference and explore some of the issues that were raised in the proceeding and in MISO's filing. So this FERC conference will occur on May 4th. Some of the things that it will be looking at will be transmission system performance requirements, functioning as a transmission asset versus a market participant, issues around cost recovery, impacts on connection queues, and other interconnecting projects. Moving on to hybrid resources. So MISO does have a number of parameters and issues already set out for hybrids. They're broken down into two phases. The first phase is really a minimum viable participation model, and we expect to see activity coming Q3 through some of the committees. And some of these issues in the phase one relate to how to specify bid parameters, participation with respect to ancillary services, as well as impacts of forecasted values on the resource. Then, subsequent to the completion of that phase, that minimum participation model is an enhanced participation model, perhaps not likely to proceed this year, but certainly we'll see how that goes after phase one. And also to reiterate what Mike mentioned at the beginning, the FERC technical conference also occurring July 23rd, which will look at hybrid resources. And then a couple other things, the dual use storage. So this is a bit of a break off of the storage as transmission only. It's partly a strategic or practical decision to break off the two, having storage as transmission only filed late in December, as I mentioned, and now looking at the other side, emphasizing more the market services aspect. So here we're looking to see, or it's intended to develop rules enabling storage as transmission to participate in markets when available. Some of the issues there include coordination to provide the dual use services, as well as issues that were raised by FERC in the 2017 policy statement. I will also just mention June 10th is somewhat of an important date for MISO. At this point, they will release the integrated roadmap work plan update, which sets the priorities over the next 5 years. In fact, in a number of, or actually half a dozen to a dozen storage-related issues will be allocated and assigned to different subcommittees, primarily the market subcommittee and the resource adequacy subcommittee, which will include issues around capacity accreditation and these hybrid issues that I mentioned earlier on. And I will keep it to that. I will now pass it over to Joel Berger, who's going to talk about SPP.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And thanks everyone for joining. So I'm Joel Berger. I cover storage developments within SPP market, as well as performing other duties within CES and data science and business analyst functions. So jumping into SPP, there has been increasing pressures from stakeholders to bridge the gaps in the tariff and other market operational structures to allow storage to participate in all areas of the market. In the middle of last year, the SPP Board of Directors approved a recommendation from the Holistic Integrated Tariff Team for SPP to draft a white paper to outline issues or gaps in procedures, tariff language, cost recovery mechanisms, technical understandings, or other issues that must be addressed such that storage is not precluded from transmission, energy, capacity, or a combination of those services. In Q1 of this year, SPP announced the formation of a new Electric Storage Resource Steering Committee, tasked specifically to address each of the 37 issues outlined in Electric Storage Resource White Paper. By the end of Q1, the ESR Steering Committee had met with stakeholders and designated specific working groups as primary, secondary, responsible parties, ensuring that each issue is mended, revised, bridged, such that there's no longer an issue for storage. And each issue has been given a priority by the ESR Steering Committee as well, but even still, many issues labeled as high priority may not be addressed until Q4 by the responsible working groups. One issue that has received a great deal of attention throughout Q1 is storage as capacity for resource adequacy. The Supply Adequacy Working Group has hosted discussions surrounded the results of a report and capacity study completed by Strape at the end of last year. Strape modeled how storage could be accredited capacity based on two methods of load support evaluation, effective load carrying capability, and capacity value. Additionally, difference in expected load support based on expected storage fleet operational objectives were simulated, either preserving reliability of the system or performing economic arbitrage. And over the course of several rounds, stakeholder feedback meetings, SPP ultimately decided to proceed with ELCC methodology using economic arbitrage as an expected storage objective for 4-hour duration storage. This equates to a high greater than 95 expected accreditation value for the near future until a storage fleet grows beyond 2 to 3 gigawatts of aggregate nameplate power ratings. Moving to Q2 of this year, the SOG will be looking to address more varieties of way to credit storage with varying duration and or as part of hybrid solutions. So now I'd like to hand it over to Patrick Shoup, who is the energy storage lead for California and the West.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel. Just as a quick reminder before we jump into the West, please submit your questions via the Q&A box on the screen, and we'll get to as many as possible. And I will try to get through West as quickly as reasonable so that we leave time to address those questions at the end. So moving on to our Western region, which is a little unique in that there is only one Western U.S. ISO market, and that is, of course, the California ISO. I'm going to focus more on California, as well as a little bit about the energy imbalance market, which is associated with the ISO and the other states in the EIM footprint. But really, starting with California and the ISO, there's plenty to talk about from the first quarter. Starting with Order 841 compliance, the ISO submitted a further compliance filing following the ISO's previous filing and FERC's request for a further compliance in a couple of key areas, including that the storage resources in the ISO need to have tariff noted characteristics, as well as a lower minimum size down to the 100 kilowatt Order 841 requirement for ancillary services in addition to energy and other market participation. And there needed to be improved practices for both wholesale and retail participation options. The next item that occurred that is particular relevance to the storage industry itself is the ESDR group meeting at the beginning of March. Energy storage and distributed energy resources is an ongoing initiative at the ISO. They're on to phase 4 now. ESDR 4 has a second revised straw proposal, and that straw proposal includes a number of items related to default energy bids for mitigation, as well as SOC parameters, and the possibility of a minimum charge requirement as the ISO is concerned that resources might not have enough charges left in the tank when they need those resources to be providing services to the grid. Another item at the ISO that is relevant to all resources, including energy storage, is their Resource Adequacy Enhancement Initiative. There were multiple meetings of the RA Enhancement Initiative reviewing third and fourth revised draw proposals. These cover a range of RA participation options and enhancements. RA is California's unique resource adequacy and capacity construct where resources are procured by load-serving entities in compliance with CPUC mandate and then are operated in the ISO market. So changes that the ISO makes to participation affect all RA resources, including storage, which are actively in the market as RA resources already. And then the flexible ramping product is also undergoing refinements right now. Currently, it is not a very high value product for energy storage, but with some refinements, it might reduce the number of resources that are able to be eligible for that market, which could make it slightly more attractive in the future. We are not really holding out hope that this becomes a super lucrative market in the ISO for storage, but it is worth noting that refinements can make it a little bit better for storage, make them a bit more attractive compared to other resources. And then finally at the ISO, a couple of big initiatives covering the day-ahead market have been delayed due to coronavirus concerns, as well as the initiative getting more and more cumbersome as the ISO tries to throw a lot of different ideas together to improve day-ahead market structures and services. So switching gears for a moment to the CPUC, another very important regulatory body in California, considering that it oversees all the most of the electricity system in the state. I think the biggest headline from the last quarter is the IRP, the Integrated Resources Planning Reference System Portfolio, which was released just at the beginning of April. It essentially is the final version of the plan that all the load-serving entities will have to follow as they procure resources into the future. So they have to file plans that follow the CPUC's IRP reference system portfolio. Now that portfolio shows a need for 9 gigawatts or nearly 9 gigawatts of battery storage resources by 2030 and almost 1 gigawatt more of pump storage or similar long duration technologies. So what this really means is that later in 2020, all the LSEs are going to have to file their own procurement plans based on this reference system portfolio, showing how they plan to get to this incredibly large amount of battery storage by 2030. Another update on resource adequacy, there have been multiple proceedings addressing different issues related to RA. Just to go through these real quickly here, there are working groups that are working on RA counting for different types of resources, including storage and hybrid resources for RA beginning in 2021. Before 2021, there is an interim methodology for RA that has been approved for some types of hybrid resources that earn the ITC, the investment tax credit. That methodology is less than ideal, taking the greater of the renewable component or the storage component, but not allowing any kind of additive RA credits. So that's something that will hopefully be improved for the 2021 year, but we do have this interim methodology established right now. And then there's also a proposed decision on a hybrid type of centralized procurement. So this is not a hybrid resource. This is a hybrid model for procuring resource adequacy from a central buyer, where LSEs would now still be able to procure resources, but they would be kind of thrown into the central buyer bucket where the utilities, SCE or PG&E, would then become the entities that gather all the RA resources and approve them or deny them actual RA credit. So this would change the mechanism through which RA is procured. And then a couple other quick updates. The SGIP program for small residential projects opened in March, but there is a delay in other budgets until May. And the microgrid initiatives are currently not looking like they are going to be using renewables or storage in the immediate future. Stakeholders are pushing for clean technologies down the line. And then a couple real quick additional notes on the state of California. There's a joint agency report on SB 100 that continues to model how the state is going to get to 100% carbon-free energy by 2045. And then grants and solicitations continue to come out from the CEC for R&D and demo projects and from all the LSCs and community choice aggregators. So there's really ongoing opportunities for storage procurements in California. And then lastly, just a quick note that EIM governance meetings continue to be held remotely as the EIM looks to balance in its governance and committee structure between in-state and out-of-state entities. There's a lot of growth in the EIM. It's covering much of the WEC in the near future, so that's going to be more and more important going forward for energy market participation. And then finally, Nevada has issued an order instituting energy storage targets up to 1 gigawatt by the end of 2030. It's going to be very flexible. Resources can be procured by the utilities as utility-owned, third-party owned, front-to-meter, behind-the-meter, really a good opportunity for many different types of storage to be deployed in Nevada in the next decade. And with that, I will conclude the Western update and turn it back to Chad, who can wrap us up and take us through Q&A.
Thanks so much, Patrick. I appreciate that very helpful update. So I'm going to try to get to as many of these questions as I can. First, I'd like to just address some of the more general questions. So we have a question, can you provide some more clarity around the terminology of hybrid resource, and does each RTO ISO view this differently? So the answer to the latter is yes. I think every ISO and RTO does view this a little bit differently and is working on it a little bit differently. The terminology hybrid resource, so really what we're talking about generally here is renewable plus storage, but hybrid resource can also mean any generation plus storage, and it can also mean any generation plus any other generation plus storage. So there's really a lot of different flavors. I think, again, each ISO kind of views it differently. And then I wanted to address a question about, can we explain some of the major applications qualified battery storage for the market? These are available in many of our offerings under the CES Emerging Technology Group. StorageIQ does touch on some of those, but StorageIQ is really more of a regulatory tracking development product. So we're not going to go specifically into the qualifications here, but again, feel free to reach out. We can certainly try to get to those. I wanted to address a few NYISO questions and turn it over to Tony to answer. We have some questions around what does ISO mandated state of charge mean? And then a little bit about the capacity market and the different duration requirements and associated credit ranges. So Tony?
Yeah, sure, Chad, thanks. So the New York market, the NYISO market is a little more evolved, where there are certainly regulatory changes going on and rule changes, and we're covering all of that. But a lot of the conversations that we're having with our clients really are about how to actually get in the market and how to be participating and making money and figuring out the finances. So this goes directly to the question of exactly what are the rules and what are the participation requirements in order to get that very lucrative capacity payment, particularly in the downstate. So briefly, what the NYISO had proposed is that if you wanted to get a capacity payment, that you needed your asset, your storage unit, needed to use the ISO's provided optimization. Now that optimization is really aimed at helping the energy storage resource fulfill its obligation to provide energy when it has to. So the objective under ISO managed is to give you what they call a feasible dispatch. They guarantee that they will not give you a dispatch to do something that you just can't possibly do with the battery because of its limitations. What FERC had said is that's all fine and good, and you can have that as an option, but you can't make that mandated in order to get the capacity payment. So both options are available. You can either ask the NYISO to manage the energy state of your resource so you fulfill your obligations and you get a feasible schedule, or you can take on that management process yourself and still be eligible for the capacity payment. So the other questions were about the prorating that is available. There's certainly some information available that we make available in our StorageIQ products, but generally speaking, 2, 4, and 6 are given a prorated value up to 100%, and then when 1,000 megawatts are in the market, everybody essentially takes a haircut. And the way it will be, say a year, 2, 3 from now, whenever we get to 1,000 megawatts, you need 8 hours of duration to get that 100%. 6 hours would get you 90%. 4 hours would get you 75%. But generally right now, people are considering 4 hours, which gets you 90%, or 6 hours, which would get you 100%. So what this means, though, is that you have an obligation to provide your energy for the duration of that period of time, and there's a whole bunch of mechanics about what that obligation means and how that obligation works, from both what your capabilities are from energy and the amount of power that you're providing over a scheduled period of time. Those are the types of things, the conversations for implementation that our StorageIQ consultants can have with you if you're bringing resources into the market. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tony. As we near the end here, I did just want to mention, obviously, thank you all for listening. We are conducting today a slightly abbreviated webinar, implying that the regular quarterly webinar for StorageIQ subscribers will provide generally more detail. And as I mentioned at the start, you can inquire and find out more about StorageIQ at ces-ltd.com/StorageIQ, or you can email StorageIQinfo@ces-ltd.com. And I did want to queue up Mike to answer maybe 1 or 2 last questions. So, Mike, I'd like you to talk specifically about the question on standardizing technical requirements across markets.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I would say that the ISOs do share notes across different topics, and they have the ISO RTO Council to help them do that. However, I'm not optimistic about ISOs having more similar rules and conforming to rules, primarily because they each have their own foundation. And so even if they try to build a similar structure, they're all building on different foundations. And we saw that with FERC Order 841 in terms of universal requirements, and they've all implemented it a little differently. They all have slightly different qualification and performance requirements, those technical requirements. So I think we will see different rules across the ISOs, but again, there are some similarities and differences, and they create opportunities and barriers.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate that. We have another couple questions on the status of FERC Order 841 compliance filings in different ISOs. Specifically, it looks like PJM, MISO, SGP, and to an extent, California. So we mentioned a little bit about these in the presentation. With regards to PJM's 841 compliance filing was accepted by FERC, but there was a few conditions. So the Commission opened up sort of an investigation, a paper hearing on PJM's 10-hour duration requirement. So that is linked to the first item that I mentioned about the development of an ELCC methodology. I hope that provides a little bit of an answer there. As far as California, I think Patrick did mention a slide here on 841 compliance filing. So what's the current FERC deadline for compliance and deadline for implementation? Patrick, do you have that offhand?
I don't have an exact date, but suffice to say these were fairly straightforward compliance issues. CAISO seems to have addressed everything that FERC asked for, and the implementation had been planned for end of this year. Certainly, FERC can come back and say you still have something else that you have to comply with, and that could change the dates, but I don't expect that there will be significant changes from here.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And then I'd ask maybe John, do you mind talking a little bit about MISO and SPP, the FERC Order 841 compliance filings?
Sure, Chad, I'll give it a shot. So with MISO, very long answer compressed into a very short answer. Everything is somewhat on hold because FERC did grant a rehearing request, mostly directed towards MISO's attachment HHH, talking about distributed storage. There were some components of the filing that were approved late last year. SPP, I think, has been mostly straightforward. I think the biggest question is deadline to implementation. SPP has asked for a long delay in their compliance. I don't know if that has necessarily been addressed by FERC. Joel, I hate to put you on the spot. If you have a firm date, please feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I think that's where it stands.
Yeah, so the firm date that was presented in SPP's compliance filing was pretty unrealistic. It was basically an indefinite delay. Right. So that was part of the section that was denied with not accepted by FERC in their compliance filing. So there's no real date at this time set by SPP.
Okay, thanks, Joel.
Great, I appreciate that. Let me see here. I see one last question on the West. So Patrick, if you can give us one last quick answer for the CPUC question. So for the CPUC IRP, do you know when are the LLCs required to submit their individual procurement plans by?
September. Quick answer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to Mark to close this out.
Thanks, Chad. It was an excellent presentation, and I'm afraid we've reached the end of the session. I'd like to thank the presenters for a very informative session. I'd like to remind everybody the ESA Annual Conference in Pittsburgh, August 26th through 28th. If you have any questions regarding any upcoming events or webinars, please email us at education@energystorage.org. Thanks so much, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Mark. Bye, everyone.